where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts on a bridge to history. What body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, Friday Jobber on the 17th of January. Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth here. This is what we call extended version, which that means is we normally do the recording very early in the morning, and we're doing it a little bit later on Friday, but nonetheless we'll take in basically the same content. We have a Washington Post Ipsos poll. Ipsos is Reuters, and the polling company used to be Roper. Anyway, nonetheless, we'll be looking at the West Coast. I was just listening to a program on public radio from the New York Times, the Daily, talking about Latinos in California, and particularly young Latinos, and their affinity for none other than Bernie Sanders, the junior senator from Vermont. And they look at Bernie's historical work since over 30 years ago. He's been consistent since he's been in public life. He started out in Chicago with the Congress of Racial Equality, and he was arrested there by the Chicago PD. So he has a long history of struggle in the field of civil rights and human rights. That they cannot take away from him. There was a debate, the last debate in Iowa, and the candidates were all there. Bernie was there, Liz Warren was there, Tom Steyer, the token capitalist, billionaire, hedge fund type, he got on the stage. Amy Klobuchar was there also, and of course Joe Lunchbox Biden was there, and Mayor Petey, who is doing better in Iowa and other states on the long haul. We talked about on the Monday Morning Quarterback the number of seats available out of Iowa. It is our contention at Cranston Analytics that perhaps this will be a little bit different situation. Very difficult to project a winner in Iowa. You can't. They're literally very close in terms of numbers and the number of people that are undecided. The way that the whole caucus process works, on the first voting, the person that has the most votes, you stand in the corner of the room if that is possible, and then the candidate that does not make the cut will drop, and so forth and so on, till they come up with a consensus candidate. It's an old New England way of doing things, and you see that happening in Iowa. Thus, it's very hard to predict. Now, the stratagem for Amy Klobuchar, she's from Minnesota, she is a senator, is to go to all 99 Iowa counties. That's a basic thing. We've been in campaigns in the past that went out and did their retail politicking early in the game. A little bit different there. It's a combination of retail politics at the same time, and as particularly during the holiday season. In a primary campaign, I can think of one, and then using TV commercials to pull the people in. Now, Bloomberg is doing a lot of that, not in Iowa, not in New Hampshire, not the early states. He's going for March 3rd because he has the resources to do that. At the same time, the three senators in the race, Bernie, Liz, and Amy Klobuchar, will be sitting there, twiddling their thumbs, listening to the DJ Trump impeachment saga in the Senate. That'll start next week. They will be setting out the rules and then opening statements. And today in comes Alan Dershowitz. He'll be there. Old Ken Starr, fresh after being ousted from Baylor University. And you'll have the guy succeeded him, Ray, and a number of others. Bundy, Pam Bundy, the former state's AG in Florida, and various other characters that hang around Fox News. Dershowitz, his job will be to argue the constitutional case against impeachment. That is what he says he will work on. He's basically an appellate attorney. He's a criminal defense attorney and also known for his defense. One of his many, many clients was Jeffrey there. The now deceased sexual predator, Epstein, and he was associated with Epstein. One of the things about being a criminal defense attorney, you don't, many times, you don't choose your client. The clients come into the office or whatever, and those are the bandwagons you jump on. If you recall, Dershowitz is now an emeritus professor from Harvard. It was on the O.J. Simpson defense team, and then later wrote a book opposing O.J. Simpson. Of course, a national hero. People are familiar with O.J. Simpson. But now, will this Senate hearing garner those kinds of numbers? No, because basically it's a very antiseptic type of procedure. They will hear from the two sides. They'll have approximately 24 hours, and that is depending on how they divide up those minutes. They could go 8 hours or 12 hours a day, and one very hard to do. In other words, basically about 3 hours each that they present their case, and then they'll get into if they will have witnesses, will not have witnesses. They could take video depositions, or they could have statements from some key witnesses, etc. There are many, many ways that this could be done. And at the same time, there is breaking news. The celeb Panar, whatever I pronounce his name, he was born in the USSR, but nonetheless, he was in there helping Rudy Giuliani, the personal attorney for DJ Trump. And what has come out is he said that they were actually shattering or following the movements of the ambassador was later removed from the post there in Ukraine. And now the State Department is finally investigating that. The Ukrainian authorities in Kiev are also investigating it. What happened to Yulanovich and why she was recalled. DJ Trump said she was bad news, and that whole circus down in the Ukraine. As many of the listeners know, we're not that hot on this entire situation, particularly Ukraine. It is just nothing but a collection of dodgy characters. And of course, Dodgy Biden, the son of Joe Lunchbox Biden, it was involved there. Now we have a situation where some hacking groups supposedly hacked the subsidiaries of the oil company involved, petroleum company involved in that particular situation. What they took off, our appearance of the old friends there, the two bears there that supposedly had been involved before, that come out of the Russian Federation, supposedly there. And we'll see those were the characters involved in the hacking of John Podesta. John Podesta was a prominent member in the campaign of Hillary Rodham Clinton in 2016. So Gummy Bear and whatever bear, I have my notes here, I had all the bears written down there as to who these various little bears were. Evidently, I think it's Gummy. Gummy has not been seen of late. I guess he's taking a holiday, Gummy Bear, out here, and so we don't know. But nonetheless, the bears are back, and I have this old tradition of writing on envelopes here, and writing on so many upside down, downside up, that I have to find where I put the bears. But anyway, they're somewhere here on some note somewhere. Anyway, if we don't find it on this broadcast, we'll have it by the time we get to the week that was. Incidentally, the week that was is our weekend program. It'll be on a Saturday morning. If not on Saturday morning, it'll be extended like this one, and we'll put it up as soon as we get to it, as one would say. But the news is ever evolving in this situation. It's not all in the Senate with old man McConnell. Old man McConnell is, of course, there. He is the leader of the Senate, and he continues to occupy that space. And the Republicans, I suppose, will try to put on a show. What will be of interest, will they just be putting on a show for DJ Trump's, the followers of DJ Trump, or will they go beyond that? We don't know. In other developments on the Iranian situation, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, had a Friday prayers, something he hadn't done for many, many years, but he led those, and he talked about DJ Trump. He called him a clown, which I'm not sure what DJ Trump's going to call the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. But nonetheless, that came out. And we also got additional information on DJ Trump, and he recounted this to his followers. I believe it was outside of Milwaukee. He's been various places. But nonetheless, he talked about the commanders telling him that there were no soldiers, combatants killed in that particular missile attack, and none injured. Now, the military has a little different way of classifying people. They call casualties both people have been killed and people have been hurt. And the Iranians had reported that there could have been up to 80 people killed or whatever. Anyway, nonetheless, the military has now come out and said that there were 11 people injured and seriously injured because they have been flown to Germany and another base they have in Kuwait. These are for people that require additional medical attention, concussions, but brain injuries. And that is very, very serious. People could be permanently disabled, or they could die. Who knows what will happen to them? But that story is expanding, and we perhaps have not gotten the whole story as of yet. And this is one of the problems when you have news that is semi-real time, and administrations like to cover up some of the facts, but the skinny gets out these days. As somebody, Defense One, that is a site, evidently they put it up, and of course the Pentagon was forced to follow up. So in other words, nothing is etched in stone these days. This is a totally different kind of situation for those of us who were around for the Nixon affair called Watergate. Nixon, Tricky Dicky, left Washington. He was not impeached. And the Bill Clinton saga there, of course, it was basically based on Monica Lewinsky, and the only linkage we have is Ken Starr and this Ray character. I'm not sure why they would regurgitate them up, because the Republican Party that pushed the impeachment of Bill Clinton is not the Republican Party of today. But perhaps that's for some of the older voters what they were trying to do. So thus we have Iowa moving on. There probably should be one other poll we'll note coming out of Iowa. Let me just quickly switch to the West Coast here and try to keep this going. The governor of California's name is Gavin Newsom. He used to be the mayor of San Francisco. Nonetheless, he will be now using state-owned trailers to house homeless people. There's a picture of he and long-serving L.A. Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas. Anyway, this is a temporary solution there to the problem, and that he doing a tour of homelessness that began in a shelter in the Sierra foothills and ended in a vacant city-owned lot in the shadow of the Oakland Coliseum. Now, this was the statewide situation. The state will dispatch 100 travel trailers to provide immediate shelter. Two homeless people posting a video there, a caravan of 15 trailers traveling down the highway. This is towards the Bay Area, where the shelters were on display for a news conference. They're going to have to do better than just this. In Oakland, the mayor there, Libby Schaaf, announced the trailers would house from 50 to 70 people in her city, but with the federal estimates suggesting 150,000 people in California do not have permanent shelter. More than 100 living outdoors or in their cars. 100 trailers would fail to help much, 1% of the population at best, period. On the other hand, it's a bit of a publicity stunt, but on the other hand, it is evidence that someone is finally paying attention. That is from Steve Vigalo, a Democratic strategist and former communications director, for those that remember, Guy Davis. Anyway, it's start to the problem. Trump has promised to do it. This is from the Public Policy Institute of California's nonpartisan poll this week found 23% of likely voters consider homelessness the most important issue for Newton and the legislature in 2020, following by housing costs and availability at 11%. So these are some of the things going on here from Rob Sussman, a Republican consultant, former communications director for Arnold. Said he doesn't fault Newsom for using the trailers to show action, which is difficult to do by toting long-spending proposals and changes. There are no pictures of that, Sussman said. Anyway, it's hard to demonstrate to voters that I get it, something needs to be done. No doubt about this. You can probably look forward to DJ Trump rounding up trailers. Now, trailers would be very important. They use those in the Katrina catastrophe. Unfortunately, they had formaldehyde in the trailers, but there is land available there, and he's also going to use these tent city operations. They can do that very quickly. Modular homes. They could also do, those can be built rather quickly. The governor called for an allocation of $750 million to the new California Access to Housing and Service Funds to support rental subsidy develop affordable housing. Is a more stable option. The legislature's funding follows a pattern to provide $650 million to communities this year to address homelessness. The problem has been they have provided funds, but the communities have not used them to actually build or make available housing. That can easily be done, providing they can find land space. They can build tent cities. They can use the modular thing. They can get big contracts. If they can build this $1 billion of wall across Texas, so to speak, they can do this, and it can be done. The pressure is coming. One of the positive things coming out of this campaign. I'm surprised Elizabeth Warren hasn't chimed in on that. She spent a lot of time talking about what Bernie said and what Bernie didn't say, and calling a lie on national TV. That's a situation they're going to have to work on. There's no doubt about that. It's one of those situations we'll see more and more of it. This is a column from the Los Angeles Times. I thought we didn't. Anyway, I'll throw it in while we're dealing with the West Coast here. This is Newsom can't afford to ignore homelessness. It's a top issue with voters. It's basically coinciding there with the California Institute's poll. Again, a picture of him and Mark Ridley Thomas. He visits Lone Star Board and Care in Los Angeles, another place here. Homelessness become the number one concern, and hasn't gone around DJ Trump and Uncle Ben Carlson. But nonetheless, he's in the position to do something about it, and you have people running around, these philanthropist types, billionaires. They could come into this also. And again, it just recites the cost here. This could have been done a long time ago. Period. ASPA should have the highest priority for state spending. Human health and human services edged out. K through 12 schools, 40 to 38. That's not very much there. But to get something done, they need to move to solutions that immediately, overnight, solve the problems and then go to long term. What they've done is, in California and many other places, have 10,000 homeless people, and yet they are building 250 units of affordable housing. That just simply will not cut it now. Those people need to be off the streets and into some stable type of units. And that is one of the things that can easily be done. There's no big problem about that. It's just something that you do and you get it done, and you can forget about it. You don't need to be in it forever in the day. It's one of those kinds of situations. Let's see if we can get this Reuters article up here, and we'll switch back and go east. Incidentally, on Monday, this is the national celebration of Dr. King's birthday, the 20th, and there'll be a lot of information there. We'll fold this probably into the Monday morning quarterback, where we'll look at Dr. King and where we are from the times of Dr. King to today, and in 2020. Very interesting situation there, and we'll be looking to see where we are. Incidentally, there's also slated to be a big pro-gun rally at the Capitol in the state of Virginia. That's in Richmond, and the governor has issued a state of emergency, and at the same time the FBI has evidently, the number is now up to 6 white supremacists from an organization called the Base, which in Arabic means Al-Qaeda. Anyway, those people are on arrest on gun charges, and we'll see where that develops to, and how it develops in Richmond on Monday. Some of these same organizations that were in Charlottesville, Virginia, are coming there. But the guns will not be permitted on a temporary basis at the state capitol. Incidentally, that is also lobbying day for many people there. So again, that is a situation that we just simply cannot afford, and the governor has done the right thing by moving in that direction. Let's see what we can get here. We'll get to the Washington Post and some of the things that we have already talked about here, looking at some of the headlines in the Post at that time as we look across here, and we will see where we go with this particular situation. We'll start featuring more opinion writers, period, and the big headline the Post has is, and this is Sanders' Warren Rip highlights liberal divide. It really doesn't. Purity versus pragmatism. This is the situation that a little bit confused when we speak of liberals, and we have E.J. Dionne. I'll be in this one. He's a liberal, but liberals versus progressives, and there are different types of people involved. Pragmatism is not a part of the progressive or social democratic situation. The difference with Bernie is more of an American generic socialist, and Liz Warren is a social democrat. It doesn't have anything to do with pragmatism there, and she is number 2 on our list of candidates, and this is something we constantly have to look at, and we'll see. Let me just we'll get back to African Americans here in the minute, and we'll get to this. Well, we'll get to African Americans first, and then we'll get to the poll here. This is the ESOP Washington Post poll. Washington Post used to be with Marcus University. I guess they changed over. I don't know the story behind it. Let me just get into this rip here. This is from the Washington Post. This is by Ann Linsky and Sean Sullivan. The current rupture between Bernie and Liz Warren over who called whom a liar is exposing genuine anger between the two candidates, who often they present themselves as friends and allies, but it also lays bare the central fight amongst liberals. Well, it's not amongst liberals, it's amongst progressives. Sanders has risen in the polls, there's no doubt about that, with little regard, with a revolutionary agenda, with little regard for cost or compromise, while Warren has won a following of liberals who is ambitious but practical. On Thursday, an array of left-leaning groups urge a truce. Well, we don't have a fight. Politico started this fight. They always try to divide people up. We should be following the path towards solidarity. That's from Sarah Edwards, President of the Association of Flight Attendants. I think also that we have to have some perspective. That is, the Democratic Party, both of these people are running because they believe they can best serve America. She added, I think it's absurd to think that they wouldn't come together and find a common ground. Well, no doubt about that. That will happen, period. Let me just get this a little in. The two have not spoke since Tuesday evening. Sanders said on Thursday afternoon, his campaign officials said the campaign sent emails to surrogates this week encouraging them not to escalate the conflict. But their differences are increasingly displayed as the candidates make their closing course arguments in Iowa, but they'll be in the Senate. They won't have much time for that. Anyway, Warren, who described her philosophy as capitalism with tough rules, has produced detailed plans and with some multiple page listings, funding mechanisms, and other specifics. Sanders, by contrast, calls himself a democratic socialist. Well, he doesn't call himself, he is. And said billionaires shouldn't exist. He speaks in broad brush terms. Well, that is perfectly thing. That is American politics, period. The two also show very different personal styles. Sanders recently revealed to the New York Times editorial board that he avoids calling people on their birthdays, which he sees as distasteful pandering that distracts from the issues. And he's just correct about that. Warren uses any excuse she can to get on the phone. Oh well. And if Sanders and Warren conflict has been a long coming, the catalyst was abrupt and unexpected in recent days, Warren said during a private dinner in 2018 at her condo as the two discussed the 2020 race. Sanders told her he didn't think a woman could beat DJ Trump. Sanders forced to deny saying that. And why should he? That would be political suicide there. Probably what Bernie should have said was, we discussed the issue and I presented various scenarios and hypotheticals to her, and leave it at that. Anyway, Warren approached Sanders and there was an open mic. He reached out for her hand. She refused to shake it, saying, "I think you called me a liar on national TV." Sanders seemed taken back, replied, "Let's not do it right now. If you want to have the discussion, I'll have that discussion." She replied, "Anytime." Sanders said, "You called me a liar. You told me all right. Let's not do it now." Anyway. So, very difficult to get into how all of this was staged other than by Politico, period. And it goes on to talk about until several years ago, neither senator seemed, of course, Liz Warren hasn't been there that long, to be a power in the Democratic Party. But Liz Warren has shown that she can produce. She built the Consumer Protection Agency. They would not let her head it, so she ran for Senate and beat Downtown Brown in the Commonwealth and just whipped him, period. Leaders of all 6 liberal groups have either endorsed Warren or Sanders' joint statement saying the senators' campaign supporters will need to find a way to cooperate. They will have to do that. There's no doubt about that. That always happens. And Larry Cohn, he's the brother of Ben and Jerry's. Established by Sanders, it's going to take collaboration to accomplish results in July in Milwaukee. No doubt about this. Particularly one of the middle-of-the-road Democrats happened to be the standard bearer. So that's some things we'll have to work through, H, as you know. Anyway, he spoke to Sanders said he had spoken to Warren in 2015 before launching his own presidential campaign, saying he would defer to her as the left standard bearer if she wanted to get in the race and challenge Hillary Clinton. I don't doubt he did that, but Warren chose not to run that year. That probably should have been the year she should have ran, and also Joe Lunchbox Biden. But they did not do it. And to the dismay of many liberals, she also did not endorse Sanders during the campaign. I didn't know that. Instead, saying on the sidelines until the very end, when she gave her nod to Clinton, I didn't know she didn't endorse Sanders. That was unfortunate. But she's in transition. This is a woman who is, I'm not trying to trash her here, who had been a Republican at one time and come a long ways there. There's no doubt about that. But, these things haunt people. Will it affect Bernie in the long run? No. It won't. Bernie supporters will stick with him. What Liz Warren has to face is if her numbers keep going down or do they go up, period. Let me go to African American voters here as we look at our time. We're doing all right. And then we'll do the poll and we'll wrap this up here. This is from the Washington Post. African Americans deeply pessimistic about the country under Trump, whom more than 8 in 10 describe him as a racist. This is from the Post poll. Anyway, Trump made a stark appeal to African Americans during 2016 when we asked, you have nothing to lose. 3 years later, African Americans have rendered their verdict on his presidency with deep pessimistic assessments of their place in America under him. The findings from the poll of African Americans nationwide which reveals fears on whether their children will have a fair shot to succeed, and the belief that European Americans, they use white, now I'm changing that over to be more descriptive, don't fully appreciate discrimination that African people experience. While personal optimism about their lives, African Americans today offer a bleak view about their community, which African Americans are judged by the progress of the community. Also expressed determination to try to limit Trump to a single term. 8 in 10 African Americans say they believe Trump is a racist, that he's made racism a bigger problem in the country. 9 in 10 disapproval of his job rating. Pessimism goes beyond assessments of the president. 65% of African Americans say it is a bad time to be an African person in America. This view is widely shared. A clear majority of African American adults across income, generational, political lines. By 70% of African Americans say it's a good time to be a European, with a wide majority saying European people don't understand discrimination faced by African Americans. I would sort of disagree with that. They do understand it, but Courtney Tate, she's 40 years old, an elementary teacher in Irving, Texas, outside of Dallas, said since Trump was elected, he has been having more conversations with his co-workers, discussions that are similarly enlightening and exhausting about the issue of race that he and his students face. As an African person, you always see all of the racism, the micro aggregations, but as a quote-unquote European, they don't understand this is a thing is going on, said Tate, who said he is the only African American male teacher in the school. That's not unusual there. Francine Cartwright, 44-year-old mother of 3 from Morristown, New Jersey, descendants of Trump, has all the way she thinks about European people in her life. If I'm in a room with a European woman, I know that 50% of them voted for Trump. They believe in his ideas. She's a university researcher, incidentally, and I look at them and think, how you see me. The president routinely talks about how steady growth and economic and growing economy and historically low employment has resulted in more African American jobs. That is correct, and lower jobless rates for African Americans recorded. A month ago, he said what I've done for African Americans in 2.5 years, no president has been able to do anything like that. But those factors have not translated positively for the president. 77% majority of African Americans say Trump deserves only some, hardly any credit for the 5.5% unemployment. A lot of what has happened here, and Numbers Man, known as Numbers Man show, we talk about this, but what has happened here when you create a tight economy, unemployment amongst Europeans is about males 3.1, females 3.2. You have a scarce supply of workers. The same thing happened in the dot-com boom, although there were not that many African Americans in it during Bill Clinton. But African American unemployment went down. All boats were lifted. They were lifted a little. The decline was from a high. Now this is a depression, 16.8. This is when Barack Obama was president in 2010 to 7.5 when he left office. But again, he left office roughly almost 4 years ago. And the decline was a steady thing there, period. I don't think Trump has anything to do with the unemployment amongst African Americans. That is from Esther Smith. She's a 72-year-old nanny who lives in Latham, Georgia. That is a suburb of Atlanta. I've always been a working poor person and just who I am. African Americans report a little change in their personal financial situation in the past few years, with 17% saying it's been getting a little bit better, 26% saying it's been getting worse. and only 54% said their financial situation stayed about the same, and it would depend where that they work. A disproportionate number of African Americans, particularly in Washington and in state capitals, work for whatever state or the federal government. A little different situation if they have not been made redundant. A similar 56%, a majority of African Americans, rate the economy as not so good or poor, in contrast to others who find most Americans overall rate the economy positively. Well, there's been sort of ups and downs in that. Just 16% of African Americans believe that most African American children born in the U.S. today have a good opportunity to achieve a comfortable standard of living. 75%, a majority, think that European children have such an opportunity. Well, that is skewed from our polling experiences and modeling experiences and looking at polls. A lot of European Americans don't think so, and for my association with students at university, a lot of students don't think so, that they will achieve the financial liberation of their parents. In other words, they will not make as much money. They are loaded with debt and various other things that are weighing on them. 8 in 10 say they do not trust the police in America. Very good reason for that. And that means what? 2 in 10 do, and 7 in 10 the U.S. to treat all people, all races equal. 7 in 10 distrust police in their own community. Should be a larger number than that. Just 2 in 10 say that most European Americans understand the level of discrimination African Americans face in their lives, while 8 in 10 say, wait a minute, that was 2 in 10 say that, and 8 in 10 say they do not. My take on that is that most do on a personal level, but they are not talking. Starkly negative outcomes appear to be the turnabout from previous points during the administrations of both President Obama and G.W. Bush. According to a survey, this is by the Kaiser Family Foundation that was in 2011, found that 73% of African women say it was a good time to be an African woman in America, while a similar survey in 2006 found 60% of African men saying it was a good time to be an African man. So there's a totally a different situation there, and yet the South Pole finds that 65% of African Americans say they feel optimistic about their own lives. More are all the time. The positive personal outlook crosses ages. While it peaked among those who are older with higher incomes, roughly half of African Americans with incomes under $35,000 annually say they feel optimistic about their lives. Dana Clark, father of 11 kids, oh boy, in Ontario, California, says he tells all his children that it's possible to succeed in America, but they have to work harder than Europeans. I tell them we are going to set up this plan, what you want to do there, but it ain't going to be easy, especially if you want to make some money, because you're going to be in a world where you're not expected going to expect you to be there, and there's no doubt about that. Education is a constant situation. The nonpartisan research firm is one of the most extensive recent polls focusing on the country and President Trump. This is the survey by the Post, who are, and again, that's up. Reuters is in there. This is of 1,088 non-Hispanic African adults, including 900 registered voters there. Few black voters responded positively to Trump's campaign appeal for their vote. Exit polls are during the 2000, and I'm going to pinch this because people need to read this. Said 8% of African Americans supported DJ Trump, 89% backed Hillary Clinton. Although the turnout was significantly lower than in 2008, 2016 in the election of Barack Obama. The poll found roughly 3/4 of African American adults said the thing that Trump is doing as president are bad for African Americans. No doubt about that. Kenneth Davis, a truck driver who lives outside Detroit, said that when Trump was elected, co-workers who secretly harbored racist thoughts felt emboldened to publicly express them. One gentleman was waving a Confederate flag on the back of his pickup. Mr. Davis, who is a Marine Corps veteran, he said he was very brave to say, Trump, President, I'm going to get my window painted. The retired federal prison warden Keith Battle said the political climate has exposed unresolved racial issues. He lives in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Said white supremacists are not the majority of whites in America, but they are a significant amount still. I'd say 30%. That's very interesting. They feel jeopardized of losing what's called white privilege. Survey respondents were asked to say how the Trump presidency affected them personally or African Americans in general. The response illuminated the data. Trump has not done anything for African American people. One said he's created an atmosphere of division and overt racism, fear of immigrants unseen in many years. The third said he's taken hate against people of color in general, and from the closet to the front porch. There's no doubt about that. People have felt emboldened, and also at the same time, one would say empowered. Trump's overall rating amongst African Americans stands at 7%, with 90% disapproving, and including 75% who disapprove strongly. Now, there used to be this old argument out there that many conservatives fostered. They would say, well, what has Barack Obama done? He hasn't done enough for African people. Well, Barack Obama was the president of all America. We remind people of that. And the national leader, and the same national leader now, was Dr. Al Sharpton. Trump received somewhat higher marks among self-identified African American conservatives, with 25% approving his performance, comparing with 5% of moderates and 3% of liberals. Well, there are not that many African American conservatives around, except those that work for organizations. He received between 4 and 5% support amongst the black registered voting head-to-head matchups with the 7 potential nominees. The level of support depended on what the nominee was. It was 85% with Joe Lunchbox Biden, and it fell to 57% with Mayor Petey. And nonetheless, the poll was conducted January 2nd through 8th, 2020, through the ESOP Knowledge Panel, a large online survey recruited for random sampling of U.S. households. The margin of error is 3.5 with the sample, and 4 points amongst the 900 registered voters. And if we start to look at the poll itself, now this is a different poll here. This is the same poll. I'm sorry about that. It is actually the same poll, and sure right now which poll I will display up here. The PF poll. Anyway, we start looking. If the Democratic primary caucus were held in your state today, for whom you would vote, Joe Biden was at 48, Bernie was at 20, then it drops down, Liz Warren at 9, Bloomberg at 4, Cory Booker, who's no longer, was at 4, Mia Petey at 2, and so forth. And one of our favorites, Amy, but anyway, it just didn't happen. Yang there, and a lot of this is exposure there. Tulsi Gabbard and various others didn't show up in this. Amongst Democrat registered, who would be your second? Bernie Sanders was second, then Liz Warren, then Joe Biden. And Cory Booker's long gone. Amy Klobuchar got 4 in this, and so she did relatively well. Amongst those still standing, and Bloomberg, I'm surprised he got 5 points. His dismal record in New York. And let's see, are there any candidates you would definitely not consider supporting for the nomination? Tulsi Gabbard is high in this, and 23%, Bloomberg 17, Mia Petey 15, Bennett, these characters are no longer around here, at 14, and Patrick is high at 13, Amy Klobuchar 11, along with Tom Steyer, and Andrew Yang at 10, and Booker, boy. And 7% said they wouldn't support Bernie Sanders. 6% Liz Warren. Sort of interesting there. You definitely not supporting. You definitely not consider supporting there, but they are lower there. Tulsi Gabbard, yeah, I can understand that. Candidates that were high on the list there. This is one, the lower you're on the list, you're in a bit of shape there. How favorable or unfavorable, in your opinion, each of the following candidates? Joe Biden got 44 on the strong there. Liz Warren was at 19. Bernie was at 29. We have the net fables there. We get 69 for Joe Lunchbox Biden, only 51 for Liz Warren, and 63 for Bernie Sanders. Mia Petey is down there at 26. Klobuchar is at 22. And some of that is name recognition. Bloomberg at 29. Oh boy. In other words, yeah. More favorables coming out. Bernie's at 71. Joe Biden's at 78. Amy Klobuchar's at 25 here. Who would be best to defeat DJ Trump on issues? B would be best handle issues that are important to African Americans, and C, and so forth and so on. Joe Biden's at 53 here. 32 to handle issues, and would unite the country at 43. Strong character 33. Bernie is at 18 and 19 to handle the issues of African Americans and unite the country. Liz Warren's very low here. She's at 5 and at 7 and at 6. And then you get Bloomberg here and so forth and so on, and then some of them didn't make. Is it most important to you that Democratic nominee for the president? Summarize what positions on the issues at 33. Who seem most likely at 57. These are the cross tabs here. How likely are you to vote in the primary? 71% said they would vote in the primary. In the presidential election in November. And 10% said they would probably vote there. And again, if a European candidate wins the Democratic presidential nomination, how important, if at all, would it be to you personally? The net was 27 there, and there wasn't very much movement on that question. If the 2020 candidates election were held today, for whom would you vote if the candidates were? And 82% would vote for Joe Lunchbox Biden, only 4% for DJ Trump. 74% would vote for Bernie Sanders, 71% for Liz Warren, and 58% for Amy Klobuchar. So this is some of this. I think we can get this finished up. Thinking about different types of people you might consider supporting for president, how would you feel about supporting someone who is over 70 years old? 4% enthusiastic, 48% comfortable, and 34% somewhat reserved. Somebody younger than 40, only 9% felt enthusiastic, but 54% were comfortable. And then they asked about a gay man, a member of the Queer Nation. 8% were excited, 49% were comfortable, and 20% had some reservations. A European man, well, let's see, a European man. 70% were comfortable, 65% would support a European woman, and a billionaire, 41% there. There are no fools there. And which of the following represents your views? The Democratic Party, 82% was a net, and the Republican Party, only 13% there. In your opinion, are the things that Donald Trump is doing as president good, bad, and neither good nor bad? Net was 4, very, and somewhat, etc. there. Nobody was very enthusiastic about DJ Trump. In general, do you think it's good or bad? We answered some of those questions. A good time of 30% there, a bad time 65%. These are African Americans. To be a European American, good time 77%. A bad time 18%. Do you think most European Americans do or do not understand the level of discrimination African Americans face in their lives? Most Europeans do understand, 19%. Most do not understand, 78%. We talked about this previously, the cross tabs there. as we find this. And the police, we talked about that. In the U.S., 14% there. 83% do not. So low number there. And that would probably depend on their status. The methodology, we talked about that. The poll is a random sample of adults in the U.S. who identify as non-Hispanic African Americans, including those who identify as African alone, and those who identify as black and one or more races. I guess that would be on mixed races, where they stand. And let's see, I guess this is it. The margin of error here for the survey's design, which is 1.4 for the survey, 1.4 attempts. And the sampling error, including design efforts for all full sample, is a plus or minus 3.5% there. And the subgroups included, etc. So this is basically where people are in the scheme of things. Incidentally, as we close out here, the managers, as previously of Houston Astros, were fired there. And in Boston, Mr. Cora was let go by the Boston Red Sox because he was a bench coach for the Houston Astros. And also there was a situation, I believe, with the Mets there. A player was let go there also. So this scandal, in All About Sports, we'll cover this in a more detailed situation than we have in the past. The University of Virginia, we have not had anything from them. An unfortunate note here, Ayanna Presley has a conversation about a scalp disease that causes hair loss, a baldness, what he would call alopecia, I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, she has it and is losing her hair as she moves along. Presley announced an interview with The Root in which she revealed that she is bald. And because I'm not here to occupy space, I'm here to create space, I want to be free. She's the first African American to represent the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in the Congress. So that is where she is. And I think we already brought the Virginia story to light here on these white supremacist characters. We will probably have more of that on the week that was, as we judge upholds. This is Northam. He's the governor there in Virginia. The band, the FBI, has, of course, arrested 7, and this is the announcement. This is a challenge by the Virginia Citizens Defense League, the primary organizers of the Gun Owners of America. Yeah, okay, that's who they call themselves. Anyway, the Second Amendment right to bear arms is not unlimited. A judge wrote, citing federal case law that upheld a ban on weapons on U.S. Postal Service property. So there's sufficient case law there for this. And Democratic Control Rules Committee last week imposed a permanent ban on carrying guns inside the Capitol and the legislative offices, which is a good thing to do. So now they have background checks, those kinds of things in Virginia. The National Guard, no doubt, will be put on notice. We'll cover this more from a local standpoint and see exactly where we are here. And the FBI, the methodology has changed. Arrested 3 members of a white supremacist group, the Base, ahead of the Virginia rally there, and one was, and they talk about the translation by Al-Qaeda, Brian Mark Limley Jr., 33, and William Byberg, the 4th, I guess it's a Bilberg maybe, 19, both of Maryland, were charged with transporting an alien and conspiracy to harbor an alien. And also a machine gun was there. And Patrick Matthews, he's 27, had been living in Newark, Delaware. He's accused of transporting a firearm and ammunition with the intent to commit a felony, and are members of the base. The base is encrypted. The complaint charges within the base's encrypted chat room. Members have discussed, amongst other things, recruitment, creating a white ethno state, committing violent acts against minorities, including African Americans and Jewish Americans. This Limley here previously served as an Army scout, while Matthews was a combat engineer. Oh, in the Canadian Reserve. He's a Canadian that slipped across the border. He went missing in Canada in August, and U.S. officials said he slipped across the border. Limley and Bilberg met up with him in Michigan and brought him to Maryland and Delaware. And on January 2nd, FBI just watched while he took the weapon to a gun range in Maryland. That's one of the things to note, that these gun ranges, gun sales, they have company there, period. After returning to the gun range, Linley acknowledged he told Matthew, "Oops, it looks like I accidentally made a machine gun," and noted that he would be in trouble with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosive. Found out about the weapon, and of course Northam had cited things that he information that had been going around. He asked non-essential state workers not to come to work on Monday, a state holiday during which legislative staff were normally on duty since the legislature's in session. And the FBI Director Ray warned Congress in the fall that American neo-Nazis seemed increasingly to be communicating with like-minded violent racists overseas. Yeah, this has been going on for a while. In September, the FBI arrested an army soldier who had allegedly hoped to join a militia in the Ukraine. Now, this is one of the things about this whole Ukrainian story. The Ukraine is full of neo-Nazis. They're all over the place in the Ukraine, period. Nonetheless, this will do it for us. Have a good weekend, everyone. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. We'll have the week that was. We'll have a full Numbers Man show. We'll have the latest housing numbers out there. We'll talk about the trade pact between China and the U.S. We'll read a little bit of it. And we'll have much more information here. Retail sales, national sales, people there out, I believe it's 4% there. And we'll have just a lot of information to tune in to it. And hopefully the next few days, we'll get an open source report over also. And also a happy King holiday on Monday. Remember to celebrate it. Thank you, Dr. King, the historic civil rights. And as Paul Harvey would say,